Hello and good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to welcome you to our MOOC this evening. Are you ready to land a job in tech? Because if you're worried about the dreaded technical interview, don't worry, we've put together this concise MOOC to walk you through the best tips and tricks to prepare for a technical interview if you want to become a developer or a software engineer. My name is Jane and I will be your Code First Girls host tonight. I am a CFG ambassador and also one of the instructors for our courses. So if you have any questions about Code First Girls or upcoming classes or events, please do put them in the YouTube chat and I will do my best to answer them during the session or in the Q&A afterwards. From the GFK team will be Fernando de Freitas, who is a principal software engineer. He will be running through his presentation on beating the technical interview, and then Erin Hokinson, who is the operations manager for client platform engineering, who will be backstage ready to take part in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of the session. Code First Girls will be running other MOOCs throughout the next couple of months, so please do have a look and sign up for a future MOOC. These sessions give you great insight into key technical languages or concepts. I will share all the links to this in the chat. We also have several career switcher classes this spring and summer, so if you're looking to springboard into a tech career, you can find out more via the link that I will share when we kick off. I'm also one of the career switcher instructors, so you never know, I might have the pleasure of teaching you later in the year. Just to let you know that the YouTube video will be up for a week or two after the session today, so if you want to rewatch any of the session, you can do it by visiting the same YouTube link. Without further ado, I am happy to welcome Fernando onto the stream to tell you how to beat the technical interview.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Fernando de Freitas. I'm a squad lead and also a principal software engineer in the GFK Neuron project in GFK. So today I'm going to walk you through a couple of aspects of interviews in general, and then we're going to dig deeper into the technical side of things. So let's just take a look quickly at the agenda. As you can see there, it's basically, it's going to be 7 different topics. We're going to be talking about interviewing, and then we're going to talk about specific technical interview types, and then also a couple of things you have to, or it's good to be aware of, you can take advantage of, or it can get you in a better position during an interview. So yeah, to get started, interviewing as a separate skill. Basically, interviewing is not only something where you just go and write code. It's a set of it compile. Sorry, it's a group of like subsets you need to have for interviewing. That when you get really good at practicing interviewing, it's also going to be very useful for you in your daily job and also in your daily life. Being good at interviewing means you are really good in communication and also collaboration as 2 of the main points. So yeah, similar to problem solving or knowing specific programming languages, knowing testing, knowing how to use agile methodology, interviewing, yeah, it's another like building block of your professional career. Talking about specifically, I think maybe I went a bit ahead. Oh, okay. I think the app has messed this up a little bit. Let me just quickly get my backup here. So yeah, like I was saying, interviewing involves communication, collaboration, also confidence or being confident about yourself, having adaptability, and also problem-solving skills. Apologies that the software has messed the slide here. Let's go next. The other thing that's really important to keep into consideration is that an interview is a negotiation involving 2 different parties. It's the company on one side of the table, and then there's you on the other side of the table. you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. If you were to choose the offer they make to you, that's also uh, kind of like a career choice. You're going to be investing part of your time there, right? So it's also very important for you to make sure you're making the right decision to join the right company and the right team. Um, Also, you have to also keep always in mind you are a professional offering a service to this company, um, and you're basically both in the same level. Like you are not meant to be at a disadvantage when you're interviewing. Next. Also, again, I keep talking about communication and collaboration. You can see here I'm mentioning communication again. Uh, your presence matters, and I'm not talking about like the way you dress or something like that. I mean like I was saying before, being confident about yourself, staying relaxed while going through the interview process, and being able to just yeah, treat it as you're talking to somebody who's probably going to be either your coworker or your superior. So it's kind of like a similar to also like first impressions kind of thing. You want to get a feel of how it's going to be working with them, and they also want to get a feel of how it's going to be working with you. Sorry, I think I got ahead of myself again. So yeah, as you can see there, everybody really at the end of the day, they want to have a coworker they can speak to and who's collaborates with them and actually pays attention to their ideas and what they have to say. And this last point is very important. This presence and communication point because of COVID and everything that's happened now, we are moving increasingly more to remote working, and interviewings are I think they're now being like around 80 to 90% of interviews are being performed remotely around the world. It's very rare now for you to have to go to a physical office to do an interview. Um, when we are doing interviews remotely, it there's a lot of non-verbal communications and cues that get lost because we are in the front of a computer and a webcam. So making that extra effort to communicate better is going to help both sides as well. If you are nervous during the interview or you're stuck, for the interviewer, it's going to be more difficult to notice if you're struggling. They don't have like your physical, your body language, and those kind of things. It's not that easy to recognize. So that's why it's very important, both for you as a candidate and for the interviewers as interviewers, to try and always have like a really good communication going during the whole process. Now we're going to talk about interview types. This is technically, you could also call it the types of technical tests you can have. I have grouped them in three main types. I have kind of cheated a little bit because in technically a code challenge is very similar to a whiteboard. This is like a different environment. And then there's also practical. This is not like the standard name for this kind of test. This is like the name that's like closer to what's actually happening in that test. So let's dig deeper into each of them. The whiteboard interview. This is maybe like something that's very famous from TV shows and also from big companies. This has pros and cons, which we're going to explore now. In the pros for the whiteboard interview is that you don't need to have any specific tools. You need to have your computer set up with some specific IDE and some specific development environment. You just basically need your brain, a whiteboard, like the name says, and also some markers. This what was it, I think, yeah. You generally know what to expect, and you can practice this kind of problems a lot. There are different websites like LeetCode, HackerRank, and etc. that I'm going to mention later, and also provide you links so you can find them and practice with them. And well, the other thing is that because you don't have to have any development environment set up, and you're using something that's called pseudocode, which means it's kind of like a loose convention on kind of like what a programming language looks like. Like you're going to have if for if logic blocks, for loops, etc., variable declaration, function definitions, and the like. And yeah, the good thing is that also like everything compiles in the whiteboard. So you're not going to have any errors if you're like, while writing your solution. And yeah, like I was saying before, there's a lots of communities and tools where you can practice this. In the cons, yeah, it's not a natural environment to code in the sense that in your daily life, your daily work, you are not usually going to be writing in a whiteboard. When you're going to be writing in a whiteboard, you're going to be doing some usually more like a design than anything else. Sorry. The other con is that everything just compiles, so you don't have you're not going to have these tools like, for example, I mentioned here in the first point, syntax highlighting. We are very as you progress in your development career, you get more and more used to have tools with you, and that's why they're called tools, right? They're there for helping you and to basically make you be more efficient. Things like syntax highlighting help us to basically recognize patterns in the code and makes it easier for us to know where we are in a specific function or a file, etc. When you're doing a whiteboard interview, you're going to have like, you could have markers of different colors and the like, but in the end, it's not that easy, and it's going to make it easier for you to kind of like maybe get lost every now and then. Talking about this, everything just compiles. That's also another issue. Usually, when you're working with a text editor and a compiler, it's going to help you find errors in your code. In a whiteboard interview, you have no compiler, so any error you make, yeah, you're not going to notice until later on. It doesn't necessarily evaluate the skills you'll be using in your day-to-day. So, like I was saying earlier, in your day-to-day, you don't usually use a whiteboard. So, because these programs, they have like very specific categories, which we're going to talk about later. You can just basically practice and practice and practice a lot, and you can maybe get through this kind of technical interview, but that doesn't really mean, that's not really evaluating that much how is your performance, how your performance is going to be in your day-to-day job. Well, yeah, I think that's covered. Then we have code challenge interviews. These are basically an extension of whiteboard interviews, but in this case, you are programming in a computer. It's still, it's in some ways a bit better because you're going to feel more comfortable using a keyboard and sitting in your computer and whatnot. Depending on the tool the company chooses, you could be using a web browser or your personal setup. Obviously, your personal setup is going to make you, again, you're going to be more comfortable with your personal setup than using a web browser. Especially web browsers have some kind of delay when you're typing that maybe they can throw you off, especially in an interview where you are already a bit nervous. And then, yeah, like the way you type, you hit your keys, and the delay showing up in the screen may not help you that much. What else do we have here? Again, yeah, because this one is also an extension of whiteboard interviews, and they are under specific categories. You generally know what to expect, and you can practice these problems beforehand. In the cons, it's still, like I was saying earlier, it's closer, but it's still not quite yet the natural environment for you to code. And it's still not necessarily evaluating the skills you'll be using in your day-to-day. And if, let's say, the company went for a local development, for a local environment solution, then it's very likely you could get issues setting up your computer to take the test, which might take time off the time you have available for the tests. Sometimes interviewers and companies they give you some extra time if you have issues. Sometimes their schedule is very tight and they can't do much in that sense. So it's going to vary depending on the company and the situation. And yeah, there's also something called the algorithm lottery. This applies both for the code challenge and the whiteboard interviews. It's possible because you have these categories. Maybe you can practice as much as you want. You could be very unlucky and just like get in this interview a specific category that's not maybe the one you practice the most or the one you feel most comfortable with. So yeah, that's one of the downsides of this. Then we have practical interviews. Practical interviews, they are different from code challenges and whiteboard interviews in the sense that they are usually, they try to simulate an environment where it's going to be like your day-to-day job. To give you an example, it could be like basically you're giving a ticket and you have to take some requirements out of it and then implement those requirements. The interviewers could be like pair programming with you. So technically, yeah, you are the one driving, you are the one writing the code, but they could be helping you, making you questions or any clarification you need. So let's see here for pros and cons. Yeah, another pro is that it can be run as a pair programming exercise or like on a video call and screen share, or it can be a take-home assignment. From experience, contractors prefer pair programming exercises. They like to charge by the hour and whatnot. So yeah, they don't really look kindly into like take-home assignments because they usually take like up to 5 hours or maybe more. Whereas a pair programming exercise is usually going to last between 1 hour and 2. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, it can better simulate a familiar day-to-day situation. It's also going to make it easier to assess the candidates' specific programming language tools and let's say methodologies and principles that they have. Sorry, it's good to make it easier for the interviewer and the company to basically measure how good you are or your technical skills with this. Also your soft skills. This is obviously, if we go back to the first point in this pros, it applies maybe a bit more for the pair programming exercise. It's going to be easier to measure your soft skills, your communication, your adaptability and collaboration when you are working with an interviewer that's just like they're sitting down, virtually sitting down with you, going through the code. In the case of take-home assignments, this also applies. Usually, you go and you take the take-home assignment, and there's going to be like a next step where an interviewer is going to sit down with you and basically go through your solution, or maybe go through their notes on your solution. So even though it's not like on exactly at the moment you're writing the code, you are going to have some chance to also demonstrate your soft skills. Another pro of the practical interview is that it doesn't necessarily, you don't really need to complete the every single requirement in the test to evaluate if the candidate is successful or if they're going to, if you can make an offer to them. This also applies to a degree for the whiteboard interview and the code challenge interview. It's just like here, it's like maybe a bit more let's say visible, it's like more prominent. And the other thing about the practical interview is that it helps, at least in our experience, it makes create a more relaxed interview environment because it's more similar to a day-to-day situation. And you're going to be with people who you can be having like a quick chat before getting started with the code and whatnot. And also, usually the complexity of the problem you have to solve is maybe not as high as, for example, backtracking or those kind of things in code challenges and whiteboard interviews. You are going to feel more at ease, and it it can help you just basically have like a better performance in the interview. The cons of this practical interview, they mainly fall on the side of the company or the interviewers. Because it requires a higher standard from the interviewers. They have to also have really good soft skills. they need to be able to read the room. So we go back to the point I was mentioning earlier about, because interviews now are mainly remote, that interviewer has to be really good at picking up those cues about how the candidate is doing. Do they need help? Are they stuck? Are they stressed? Could you maybe give them a nudge to get them kind of like back in the right direction, or also recognizing when you have to just leave them alone a little bit, because if you give them a nudge, maybe you're just like making them more nervous. The test also can be very complex to design, because if you want to evaluate a usual day-to-day situation, um, there's always compromises that have to be made. You can't, let's say, simulate like the whole process. You can't simulate writing a ticket, refining it, then writing the code, then doing the testing, checking if they know how to use Git and the like. So you have to go and create like a mini situation, and usually that means like maybe there are going to be things that are going to be left out. Well, we go back on the third point to due to the open-ended nature of it, because I was saying like you have to like let go of a couple of things. You can't just like evaluate everything. It needs more strict metrics defined for the interviewers, because you need to have like let's say consistent metrics across all the people you interview. Maybe some people are going to be really good on the tickets, the specification, requirement gathering side of things. Maybe some people are going to be really good at testing. Maybe some people are going to be really good at something else. So how do we set up some metrics so we guarantee everybody's being evaluated equally? That's also a pro I forgot to put in the slide for the whiteboard interview. The whiteboard interview is kind of like very binary. It's like yes or no. So these ones are, a bit more complex in that sense. Like I was saying, usually they require more time. At least, 1.5 hours. Whiteboard interviews and code challenges, they could be like half an hour or maybe even less, because they're usually super contained. The other con for this is that it's not really usually the best tool for interviewing at entry-level positions, because since we're trying to emulate a day-to-day situation, and people who are junior developers or recently grad people, developers, maybe don't have that experience of going through like the usual process. In that case, usually, like the other two options are slightly better. It's also going to depend on how you design it. So here, like to finish up or to summarize, obviously, like everything in life, every single interview type has pros and cons. Something actually I was going to mention, I was going to get ahead of myself again. The whiteboard and the code challenge interviews, they are used by big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, etc., as a filter due to the high volume of applications they receive. So for them, it's not like they're being mean in a way. They get so many applications, they need to start applying some filtering. So usually for these companies, you go through more than 2 stages of interviews. So if you go through this whiteboard and code challenge one, then you're going to get to most likely something more like a practical interview. Sometimes it's also like a design interview involved where you design systems. So that's something to keep in mind. And the other thing is that maybe you have heard the term the Spotify model. So the Spotify model is a model of like a company structure model popularized by Spotify. Although lately they have been denying, they were just like publicizing this. Many companies have taken on the Spotify model and implemented it incorrectly. So that this is also something that's happened for whiteboard and code challenge interviews, and it's also given them like this kind of like bad reputation that they have now. Because the fact that a big company does it doesn't really mean that your company should be doing it. There are reasons. You have to evaluate the reasons, and you have to evaluate if your use case is the same as their use case. So yeah, like I said, it's not always the best path for smaller or also also bigger companies. It doesn't really. You have to basically evaluate your interviewing philosophy and your company culture as well. Now, there's kind of like a shameless plug here, talking about GFK. So practical interviews are the ones we favor inside GFK Neuron for mid-level positions and above. I am personally involved in interviewing people for different roles in this project. And going back to what I was saying about the cons for the practical interviews, for entry levels, junior, grad, etc., we have code challenge interviews, but we have like introduced a twist where the candidate goes to the interview. They get into the interview, and we give them basically a preset list of problems of different categories for them to choose. So the idea is also to make it, again, talking about creating a relaxed environment. So basically, or a safe environment where they feel comfortable, basically, displaying their skills, their abilities, or publicizing themselves in this, or doing this kind of like, in a way, an interview is a sales pitch as well. So yeah, we try and have like the best environment possible for the candidate to succeed. And like I was saying also earlier, for both of these interview models we have for mid-level and above and entry level, we don't evaluate on completion. So it doesn't, the fact that you didn't finish every single requirement in the test doesn't mean you're not going to get the offer. We'll also take into consideration the different other aspects. And after we put all those together, like I was talking about earlier about metrics, we try to establish metrics that we can make sure we're evaluating everybody like around the same level. So we can make like a better decision when making offers. And yeah, it's been fun to be a successful way of interviewing so far, and this philosophy is also being adopted in similar projects within the company. So next, interviewing the interviewers. This is also something really good to mention here. We go back to what I said earlier about the interview being a negotiation. There's two parties in the table. So just as the company is interviewing you, you are also interviewing the company. And that the interviewers are going to be a really good source of information for you to basically make the decision if that's the place where you want to be working or not. A couple of things to remember is that interviewers are also employees in the company. They're usually, I mean, there are cases where they're like consultants that just come in exactly to do interviews, but in the vast majority of cases, interviewers are just developers, are also developers or managers who work in this company, and they, aside from on top of their daily tasks and whatnot, they are also doing interviews. Some of them, like me, for example, do it because yes, we like interviewing people. It's a really good, something we like being involved in. And because they are just regular people working in the company on a daily basis, you could get a lot of information on how the company works, their specific methodology, how their teams are constituted, how the teams work between each other or internally, etc. Another thing is that keeping in mind that also developers, you don't have to be afraid to ask follow-up questions, either during the technical interview for the technical test for the specific problem you're solving, or also usually at some point in the interview, you're going to have time to have a chat with them where they're going to be making you technical questions, and you're also going to be able to make questions back to them. So this is a very common mistake I see candidates making. When you get to this point where the interviewer asks you, do you have any questions? Use that. Take advantage of that. Before you go to the interview, do some research on the company. If you happen to know the name of the interviewers, you can also look them up in LinkedIn and see how their experience and whatnot. And that's really going to help you make a more informed decision when you eventually you get an offer. Because it's also not unlikely that you're going to have multiple offers on the table at a given time when you're going to be able to choose. So when you are making that decision, the more information you have on the company, the team you'll be working on, if you get to know information about that, and also your job position, it's going to be very useful for you. Yeah, also, I forgot to mention, this is obviously a life choice, and you're going to be investing at minimum a couple of weeks. Assuming you take the job and you come in and immediately you say, no, I don't really not interested in this, you at this are going to have to work your notice period. So remember, time is precious, so use it wisely. Now, red flags. This is like the natural follow-up for interviewing the interviewers. Things to be aware of. This doesn't really apply only for a technical interview. It applies for the whole interview process, and even for the job spec. There are a couple of things you can notice even when you get the job spec. So let's go through the interview process first. Um, this sadly happens often. It's happened to me a lot. When you go to an interview and the interviewer is not so interested actually in knowing or finding out what you know. They are more interested in basically bragging about what they know to you. An example I have that happened to me is so I'm mainly a front-end developer, so I work with JavaScript, CSS, HTML, etc. and browsers. Um, this specific interviewer, he was asking me very specific details on how the browser renders basically like how it takes HTML, CSS, and all this, and eventually renders what you see on the screen. Basically, how the rendering engine works. This is not something you are going to need to know to work on a daily basis unless you're working like for Firefox or for the Google Chrome team. Um, but yeah, it was like you're going to be in those kind of situations where you can see like the interview kind of like not really going to the place it should be going, not really focusing on you. So yeah, that's one red flag for you to keep in mind. So because we go back to the previous slide, these people who are interviewing you, they are most likely uh, uh, regular developers. You know, they're doing development job work on a day-to-day basis. So you are most likely going to be working with them. So you're also evaluating like, do I want to work with this kind of people who's interviewing me? When this is another red flag about like the process and how the company works internally. If you're asking them after the interview, hey, can you tell me anything about like how's your CI process? So CI, for those of you who don't know, is a continuous integration. So basically, it's become like very common, although there are still companies who don't really do this yet. But basically, when you're making changes to your code, you're going to have a battery of tests, from unit testing to integration testing to end-to-end testing, and there are many other different testing things, like there's performance testing, something people call smoke testing as well. So basically, a CI pipeline is where all of these tests are going to be performed on your code before you merge to master and deploy to production. So the idea is to basically keep your code quality high and also prevent production errors, because there's nothing worse than finding an error once it made it all the way to production. So anyways, when you're asking interviewers about, yeah, how's their CI set up, or how much of their code has code coverage, for example, and you see them like kind of like trying to dodge the question and not answer, yeah, that's also probably a red flag, because that means their infrastructure is going to be very, very shaky, and most likely you're going to be fighting fires very often. And the other one, talking about vague answers, yeah, work-life balance questions. Let's say if you're asking them, yeah, so what's the usual working hours? Do you work on weekends and stuff? Those are also really good questions to ask because they're going to give you an idea of how your work-life balance is going to be once you are in there. Talking about the job spec, yeah, like one of the first ones is a very long tech requirement list. If you get a job spec that says, if we're talking about JavaScript, it mentions Angular, React, jQuery, Vue, and what's the other one? I forgot the other one. But anyways, yeah, if it mentions like basically every possible tool available, and they are also like overlapping tools, either they are maintaining like a bunch of legacy code that you most likely are going to need to be taken care of, or they really don't know what they're looking for, which also it's going to be like yeah, you're going to end up like doing many different hats. That's not wearing many different hats is not necessarily a bad thing. Usually that's also like a way for you to basically grow professionally and maybe like look into adjacent career lines that you might be interested in. But usually when you see this kind of thing in the job spec, yeah, it's a red flag. When they mention a fast-paced environment, that's also, yeah, it means firefighting and those kind of things. So yeah, keep an eye out for those keywords as well. When they mention a team player or family culture, also, yeah, very likely your work-life balance is going to be not great, and also maybe the salary is going to be, you're not going to be getting the best possible salary from those companies. So talking about that, this is a good segue for figuring out what you're looking for. I just put this together as an example. So on the left-hand side, we have basically like different levels. So we have from junior to mid to senior to something called staff that me personally, I didn't know it existed until last year, to principal, which is also, I'm currently a principal engineer, but until 2 years ago, I had no idea that the principal role existed. And on the right-hand side, we have many different job titles, going from architect to UX developer, QA or ACT, basically like another name for software engineers in testing, data scientists or machine learning engineers, being a designer. Sometimes being a designer also involves doing some CSS, so you kind of end up, you could be, you could start as a designer and become a developer, or also you could start as a developer and become a designer. It happens very often that you, it's not uncommon for once you get into the tech world to be kind of like a career switching, let's say. A similar case, for example, architect. An architect is like maybe somebody who takes a step back and looks at the bigger picture and designs the bigger picture. That's also something that maybe some people are more interested in than just writing code on a daily basis. So, anyways, the point that I'm trying to get to is that in the tech world, there are many different job titles. There are many different levels as well. For example, on the left-hand side, I have this thing, but if you go and you look at Google, there's something called, I think it's levels, FYI, where you can see like the different levels. Like you start getting like you can have like staff. For example, you could get to be like a staff engineer, and then there's also like a senior staff engineer, and then there's also like a senior staff engineer grade 2, and so on and so on. So job titles in tech are yeah, there are a lot of them, and to make things worse, a given job title, it varies wildly across companies. So basically, if we look at engineering manager at the bottom, at the bottom right, and in one company, an engineering manager is somebody who's more hands-off. So they're basically taking care of like more management tasks than writing code. But in other companies, an engineering manager is actually the equivalent of a team lead or a technical lead, where you are expected to be writing code and also setting the direction for your team or that division of the company. So yeah, figuring out what you want to be is something very, it takes time. It takes a lot of reading as well, and maybe getting to know people who are working on specific job titles that you're interested in. If you're interested, for example, in being an architect, obviously by meeting people who are architects, you're going to get a better idea of if that's actually what you want to be doing. So that's from the top level, and there's also like, for example, the programming language you want to use, right? So you can be a senior software engineer and you can be doing Java or C++, and at the same time you could also be a senior software engineer doing JavaScript. So those usually don't overlap that much, because like what you do with JavaScript is not usually what you do with C++ and Java. Like there are different requirements. There are like different tools for different jobs. So yeah, there are a lot of variables involved in basically finding what's the job title of your dreams, let's say. Although you can always be trying different stuff and moving back and forth. Actually, lately it's become like a trend, sorry, that in big companies you can go the management way, and then you can come back to being a what's called an individual contributor. That's also something I forgot to put here. There's this term called ICs. So ICs are individual contributors, and that's usually people who are focused mainly on basically generating value by writing code. And then you have, on the other hand, people who are in management positions. Management positions are more focused on the people management. So maybe like an IC is kind of like a specialist. You give a specific a very specific technical job to, and then the management person is going to basically be making sure the ICs, they have all the resources they need, and basically they're not getting blocked by, let's say, external limitations, or if they need a specific server setup or a specific tool or etc. That's what they focus on top of like also coaching and mentoring, and basically helping the members of a team or a company progress through their professional career. So this is what I was mentioning before. Just like interviewing processes, the salaries and the job titles vary widely across companies. That's another point as well. In a company, a senior software developer could be paying X amount, and then in another company, the same exact role doing the same exact thing could be paying 20 and 30% more. That's also something very common. It's going to be tied more to, let's say, the available capital the company has or the budget they have for salaries. So it's also something worth keeping an eye out for. And to help you keep an eye out for, I've listed here a couple of tools you can use to basically do some research before applying to, or even after you apply to jobs. Basically, before you get to that that conversation about the salary, you can use this to find specifically like what's the salary range in the market at the moment. So we have, like I was mentioned before, we have Levels FYI, we have Glassdoor, PayScale, and board sites like Indeed, Total Jobs, and I think even a Monster or any different websites have tools available now, because it's become more and more commonplace. It's also, you can see it in the job specs. Usually they are now listing the salary range, so they give you like a minimum and a maximum. Obviously, usually the maximum is like, they are like pushing it a little bit up than they're actually going to offer you, but in any case, it helps as a reference. So like I say here, take it with a grain of salt when they give you like the top the top of that salary range. Preparing for a technical test. Yeah, so I think I've mentioned this a couple of times before. There are many different tools and websites available. Things like LeetCode, HackerRank. There are also websites for courses. There's Codecademy, Udemy, Pluralsight. Sorry. Even I think Skillshare offers some courses on development. And there's also tutorials. Tutorials, they are, yeah, you can find them basically anywhere across the internet. Blogs. YouTube is also really a really good place lately. If you are more of like this kind of like visual person, it makes it easier for you because you can be watching the video while you're also implementing it yourself. So similar to the courses, and they're usually free because they're on YouTube, and there are really good courses there, and you can go for like a very like short ones. So it can be like even 10 minutes explaining you a specific technology, so you get like the basics to massive courses with like yeah dozens of different chapters or episodes to watch. And there are also universities like Oxford, I think, and Harvard that have also publicly available courses. You can sign up in their websites, and they also have some of them in YouTube. I think it's called CS50. There's a channel they have where you can also watch videos. But basically, they record the lectures in the university, and you can just like watch them for free. Yeah, and this is like the usual categories for the whiteboard and code challenge problems we mentioned before. It's basically like, yeah, manipulating arrays or strings. You're going to see like this kind of like, yeah, find count only odd numbers in a given array of numbers, or count how many times the letter A shows up in a string, etc., etc. Binary trees, it's, yeah, basically building this data structures, which they look like trees, so very similar to the way React works, for example, or HTML works. You have like a different you have different nodes that go building a tree as you add stuff to them. So binary trees are a specific type of tree. There are also other types of trees you can usually work with for this whiteboard problems, like DFS and BFS. There's also linked lists. So basically, this is like in most cases, because you're not allowed to use libraries, you have to build your own implementation of a linked list. So which is basically like a list that has a pointer to a previous item and the next item. It has border cases, and it can be very simple or it can be very complicated. There's different levels of let's say difficulty for this kind of problems. Backtracking, for example, is one of the main points for why whiteboard and code challenges don't really like evaluate the skills you'll be using on your day-to-day. Backtracking and dynamic programming, they are very specific. So you're not going to be really using them that much. Most likely there are going to be libraries or language features that are going to be taking care of this for you. But yeah, I just listed them here so you can have an idea of like the basic categories for this kind of code challenges. This one is more like maybe not so much for the interview, but it's just going to make you like a better professional in general. If you dig deeper into learning software design principles, software design patterns, things like the testing pyramid, or even best practices and style guides for the specific programming language that you're working on. A really good example of a style guide for a language is Python. Python has PIP4, I think is the name. So basically, the creator of the language, he set up like this rules on how to use Python. And there are many linters and formatters out there that basically do the work for you. So you don't have to be like remembering every single rule he wrote. It's like you just, as you go writing, and when you hit save, it's going to just format the file for you and highlight any errors that it can't fix by itself. Right, so now we get to, I've listed here some potential interview situations and how to handle them. So let's go through a couple of them. This one is a classic. You need to have this many amount of years of experience and for this role. So what happens when you have no professional experience with a given technology? If the fact you don't have professional experience with a specific technology doesn't really mean you're not going to be able to get the job. I've done it a couple of times where I just in my personal time I've learned and worked on mini projects, side projects, just to get used to this technology and maybe like the rules and their philosophy and whatnot. And then when you go to these interviews, basically, since you have already practiced and prepared, you can just say, okay, yeah, I don't have the professional experience, but I'm willing to go and take the technical test, and then you can make the assessment from the results of my technical test. So in reality, it's a really good way of it shouldn't be something that's going to be stopping you, assuming you have already put the work into learning this technology. And obviously the only way of getting professional experience in a given technology is to actually get a job using it. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation. So yeah, that also requires a little bit of like communication and soft skills from your side to be able to like convince the interviewer or the recruiter, because usually it happens at the recruitment stage, that you are able to go and to get this job. Yeah, when the list you only have X amount of years and the company is asking for X amount plus years of experience with that technology. That's also something that's I think it's becoming less commonplace. You don't really see often, let's say, job specs asking for 8 years of JavaScript experience, because usually now it's I think it's like a common what's the name for this? It's believed across the community that like around 3 maybe 4 years is enough to consider yourself or basically for you to learn most of the things you need to learn about a specific tool or language to be proficient with it. So yeah, that's also very easy to address. If you're asking for 8 years of experience, you can usually this quote that says like 8 years of experience is not the same as 1 year of experience 8 times, because yeah, it's also like there are situations where even though you've stayed in a specific job for a long while and you've been using a single specific technology, maybe you've been just like using the same exact language features since the first year, so you haven't really learned that much in those 8 years. And the other one, this is my favorite, unrealistic requirements. When the company is asking for more years of experience than the time a given tool has existed. So this happened a lot for two Google tools or Google things. Initially, it was Android. When Android is relatively recent, and when I think it like on 2 years after it was released, companies were already asking for 4 years of experience. So in a way, you have to be with what's his name, with Andrew, the guy who created it, just like working with him in his garage, I guess. With Android to have those 4 years of experience. And the most recent one is Kubernetes. Kubernetes was released in 2014. Kubernetes is also a tool that's been initially it was heavily funded by Google, and now it just became like a Google tool. Well, not now, a couple of years ago. And basically, it was being used currently for infrastructure in the wide majority of software companies. It's even if you're using AWS as your infrastructure provider, AWS has started offering Kubernetes or managed Kubernetes as well. So yeah, that's basically like the best tool to use at the moment for infrastructure. So anyways, yeah, it was released in 2014, and then yeah, by 2016, companies were asking for 4 years of experience. So a similar story to Android. So yeah, usually just like quickly going to Wikipedia and figuring out when a given technology was released is like gives you like a good uh, amount of information about this. Then we have this one, explaining gaps in your resume. So I've taken the liberty of using a meme from Parks and Recreation about my home country, Venezuela. So yeah, when you have gaps in your resume, it's not uncommon for the interviewer to ask, and you shouldn't see it as a bad thing, because usually you are basically, that question is giving you room for you to expand and like talk about maybe you took some time off for a personal project you were working on, or to travel, or you just had a baby, etc. That's going to help you like maybe like dig more into like the interpersonal stuff as well, so you can elaborate on that, and that's also going to help position you better in the interview process against like other candidates that are interviewing. um, that being said, you also have to be let's say pay attention to the ways being asked, because some people yeah, they're not asking to like try and get like a like a conversation going. Some people just like, they have like very specific like criteria to evaluate people in the interviews. So this is why I have this meme here. It's like you have gaps in your resume, right to jail. You are overdressed for the interview, jail. You are underdressed, jail. So yeah, believe it or not, overdressed, underdressed. This is also like it's happened a couple of times, and some people, some coworkers of mine have mentioned that yeah, they've been in situations where there's been people that both either if you go to the interview dressed smart, you are already like disqualified because you're a developer. Why are you dressing smart? And also on the other hand, I've met people who, if you go just like in a hoodie and some like I don't know, some t-shirt with some cartoon on it, is also you get disqualified. So yeah, sadly there's going to be interviewers and companies that are like that. It is what it is. But yeah, don't if that ever happens to you, don't let that get you. It just happens, and you carry on and you keep interviewing, and probably you're going to find a better company later on. This is another one. So interviewing with a different technical stack. Is it by design? As in, this is a company that interests you a lot. Like you really want to work with them. And you said like, yeah, it's fine. Like maybe while you were talking with the interviewer, they told you, like you are, React, and the test is in Angular, but you really want the job. And then you say like, yeah, I'm going to put some time in. I'm going to learn, this tool, and I'm going to take the test and see how it goes. If that's the case, by all means, yeah, go ahead and do it. You are the ones who's making the choice, so it's all good. And especially when it's a take-home test, you have more leeway to basically to get this technical test to a good point that maybe is going to get you an offer as well. And in the end, it's going to help you practice. So you're going to be able to add, even if you don't get the offer, you're going to be able to add like another skill to your CV. So I've listed here, for example, a couple of things that maybe they're easier to go back and forth from. Let's say if you, going back to being an Angular JavaScript developer, maybe you are used to working with Express, and the technical test is just like a vanilla Node.js. So maybe there's a good chance you're going to be able to do this. Maybe you or the other way around. Maybe you only know Node.js and you have to be doing Express. If you go and wrap your head around the philosophy of Express, which you can do easily in a couple of days, just dedicating a couple of hours to it, you can also take the technical test easily. Angular and React, they have different philosophies. One of them goes for like the immutable kind of state, and the other one is like the complete opposite. But yeah, once you learn their philosophies, you are going to be able to like basically switch to that mental model or that paradigm, and also take the technical test. Django and Flask, another example, or Python and Ruby. Python and Ruby, they are similar in a couple of ways, and they're also very different in a couple of other ways. But yeah, if you put a couple of hours of work, you could easily, take this test and be successful. And then we have the other one. Are you taking this? You get to this technical test. Let's say if back 3 years ago, you had to go to a physical office to take a technical test. So you talk to the interviewer, you went through the first screening calls and etc. And then you get to this office, and you were expecting a JavaScript test, and then suddenly they hand you a Python test, and you don't know Python, or maybe you do know Python, but it's like, you're not prepared for this. So what happens? Like, was it a mistake from the recruiter of the company, or did they trick you into it? Sometimes it happens that the recruiters, they just want to get people through the door for the interviews. So yes, you have to also be careful of that. And then we have like a couple of ways to handle it. Is the company, like, once you mention, hey, this is not exactly the language I was meant to be interviewing in. So like, this is like basically, I don't want to waste your time and my time. What can we do about it? Maybe if the company says, okay, maybe it was a mistake, etc. We can reschedule and we can get you an interview, a technical test in the language you're actually interviewing for. Then it's good. Nothing happened. It's really good that the company is showing this willingness to to correct what they've done. But if you're saying like, no, it doesn't matter, you should take the test, that's also a red flag, because again, we go back to the job spec that has many requirements. Maybe they are not really sure what they want, and maybe you're going to end up wearing a lot of different hats, and your work-life balance maybe is not going to be that good in that company. This one is something that has been mentioned a couple of times by people I know. Being asked for sensitive documents before getting an offer or a contract. Both by the recruiter or the company. Usually, if you are a non-UK citizen, or especially for non-UK citizens, it is common to, like it's my case, it's common to be asked if you have the right to work in the UK. Since we're based in the UK, I'm making this example for the UK. But at that stage, you're not really required to provide proof. You just have to say, yes, I'm I don't know, pre-settled, settled, have a visa, etc. So in that case, in that scenario, it's all good. Nothing happens. But it's very uncommon for before you get this, let's say, basically like semi legal document, like a contract or a written offer, to be asked for like your passport or your national insurance number and those kind of things. So be very careful about this. Me personally, I can't say exactly, a situation where this is like valid. I guess if you are interviewing for a very specific government position or something like that, maybe it applies. But in general, it's, you have to be very careful, because it could be, it could be just phishing, or what's the name for this? Like they're trying to just like steal your identity or something like that. Okay, so we're nearly the end of my presentation. So I just want to note down a couple of things to keep in mind as well. Imposter syndrome. This is something we all live with, and it's especially often mentioned in the software engineering world. Basically, imposter syndrome is where when well, you have the definition there, but yeah, when basically it's your head playing tricks on you. It makes you doubt that you are really good, or maybe like like obviously not everybody's perfect, and we have to work and get more experience to get better at what we do. Uh, but that doesn't mean you're not good at what you're doing at a given level. And usually, yeah, our sometimes our mind plays tricks on us, just making us feel like, yeah, I don't really know. Or you go and you meet a person who's like, one level above you, and you say like, oh my God, this guy is a senior. I'm a mid level. Or actually, even if you go and you meet, like for example, in my case, I'm a principal, and I go and meet another principal, and that principal is like an amazing developer, and I'm like, wow, I feel like maybe I shouldn't have this title. That happens. It's normal. We're humans, and yeah, our brain is, yeah, it's a very complex and interesting thing. So yeah, don't let that get to you, especially when you're applying to interviews. You are usually going to get a lot of no's. Like I don't know. I think maybe the ratio is like 8 to 2 or something like that, or 2 out of 10 are going to be a yes. So just don't let that put you down. Keep interviewing, keep applying, uh, and yeah, obviously don't go crazy and just like apply for the sake of applying. But yeah, like the more you interview and the more experience you gain in your professional career, you're going to get better at interviewing, and your chances are going to get better. And then, like we have imposter syndrome, on the other hand, we have Dunning-Kruger effect, which yeah, it's completely the opposite. Like the less we know, the more we feel like we know a lot, and then the more we learn about a specific. When we dig deeper into a specific subject, we actually realize that we know nothing. So like it's this thing. It's reflected in this phrase about I know nothing. This is kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like the more you learn, the more you know that there's so much left to learn. So yeah, I just wanted to show you those two things. I think they are very relevant and important. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, now we have around 20 minutes and some change for the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Fernando, for that. Lots of interesting hints and tips into the industry, and I hope that helped everyone. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will invite Erin back to join us. So we have had a couple of questions. Our first question here is, are technical interviews something that you've become more comfortable with through having multiple interviews, or something that practical coding experience prepares you for adequately enough in itself? Who would like to answer that one first?
Yeah, so I think both really in this case. Like I was saying just through the end of the presentation, yeah, you become more comfortable because it's like it's kind of like breaking in new shoes. Like the more you walk on them, the more used you get to it. And like I was saying, the more you like get in your head that the people who are interviewing you, they're not like gods or like some specific special beings. They're just like people who are just like you. Yeah, it gets easier. It's just socialization. It's just human beings on the other side of the call as well. And yes, obviously the more you practice as well on the. Sorry, I don't know if you can bring the question back up.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, getting more practical coding experience is obviously going to prepare you better, both for if you go for the whiteboard interviews, code challenge, sorry. The more you practice, the more you because there are limited categories. Like you kind of like get the path in your head, and also yeah, like the more for the other ones for the practical interviews, as you get more experience, you also get more comfortable on the practical interviews.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Erin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just wanted to reiterate Fernando's point about interviewers are also human beings. I think the job I'm currently in right now is probably the best job interview I've ever had. It was scheduled for I think it was supposed to be like a 30-minute like coffee. Let's check this person out. Let's see what they are. We ended up talking for over an hour just because we got totally off track talking about things we wanted to improve in the company and all the ways I could help. And it was completely unstructured, and it just came down to myself and who the guy who ended up being my future manager. We were just having a really great back and forth conversation about the work at hand. So just remembering, like, even though you're nervous and everything, just remembering that they're a human being and relating to them as a human being, because interviewers get nervous too. It's a fact. They might be just as nervous as you are, and just bringing it back to that, like, that human element. I think it brings some calmness to both parties.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been interviewing for a company this week, and I've had on the phone so much. So whoever's at the other end of the call is not alone, and it's just good to be able to relate with someone. As you say, it's just a conversation at the end of the day. They just want to see how you deal with the situation. So thank you very much. You're getting some excellent comments saying thank you very much. Very good session. Charlie, who gave us the question, just said your presentation has been incredibly enlightening for someone starting in industry. So thank you. Um, we have another question here saying, what would be a reliable source to check entry-level salaries and related expected tasks for a junior role?
Yeah, so those are the resources. I think I prepared
Yeah, I think it
like a
was
list of links. Yeah.
back when you were talking about the job titles and stuff. There's a list of several different companies there. Can we provide the slides, Jane, after?
I can check about providing the slides, but I can, if you share the information in the private chat, I can pass it forward to
Perfect.
the
Yeah.
YouTube chat
Yeah,
as
because
well.
we had a list of those in the presentation.
Excellent, thank you. So while you're just sorting that out, I will ask another question. So if you're new or career switching, what do you think is a reasonable salary to ask for? Quite similar to the previous question. And what, also, if they want a language that you haven't got, how do you approach that? Do you say you're going to learn it beforehand? Do you go about learning it beforehand? How do you go about looking at new coding languages?
Also for the second part of the question, there's a phrase from I think Winston Churchill where he says like if you're being interviewed for a job and they ask you if you know you know yeah uh, sorry, my English is escaping me. um yeah, if you are good at I don't know like woodworking or something like that, then you say yes and you immediately get to learn and practice it. Like so in this case, it applies like a yeah, if again like I was saying in the presentation, if it's a company that you're really interested in working with, or it's a let's say programming language or tool you're very interested in using, it's totally worth it to just go ahead and spend some time in learning it. Actually, as an example, in this company, this was my first time I was using React professionally because I had been an Android developer and an Angular developer for basically most of my professional career. So basically, I took the lockdown and this whole thing helped. But yeah, I sat down, I just like got like practice with React, and then started interviewing. So yeah, it's totally you know a path to take.
Yeah, I would add to that, because I do a lot of hiring. I see dozens and dozens and dozens of candidates come through a month. And it's really interesting when you look at a job description. I think it's important to pay attention to what's listed on the job description, because we have a lot of hiring managers who are, they'll categorize it as like this is necessary, like this is, you absolutely must know. And then they'll put in the kind of nice to have category a couple of other languages. And it's because they think, okay, you might, like, depending, you might be on a project with somebody who writes in this language, so it'd be good if you knew that. And depending, we might pick up on something in the future that's in this language, so it'd be nice to know that. If it says it's absolutely required, I mean, maybe learn a little bit before you go to the interview. But if it's in the nice to have category, at least in my experience, what I've seen is that it's totally fine for you to go like, yeah, I meet all your requirements, and you put in the nice to have category, Python. I'm super interested in learning Python, and I'd be really keen to learn on the job, and follow up with some learning on my own time or something like that. So I would say one thing to pay attention to is the difference between the like need to have and the nice to have things on a job description.
Absolutely. Plus, it's really good when you come to an interview and you say, I didn't know this, but I really wanted to work for you and I've gone away and I've learned it. That is excellent. And that's what interviewers want to see. And also, especially, it does tend to be a typically female thing, but we see a job description, we want to tick all the boxes. It's good to know the difference between what you need and things that are nice to have, because if they're nice to have, it doesn't mean you need all of them. So that's super advice. Thank you very much. Another question here we have, what advice would you give someone who's an absolute beginner with little or no experience?
So this is kind of like getting into fitness, right? Like going to a gym often. If you want to learn how to code, because initially it's going to be very difficult. It's a lot of different things to learn, and usually that's actually why boot camps, for example, are very successful, because just like going to the gym, sometimes it's like, yeah, you want to do it, but you don't have the structure to do it. So like you never actually get started. So just find some structure. It could be, I'm not saying you have to pay for a bootcamp, but let's say if you even get like an idea of, if we go back to the whiteboards, you find like a problem you like, you can just like sit down and just like practice it and practice it and practice it. Or if you have like a specific idea for an app, let's say, which obviously is ambitious, but if you have an idea for an app, you can get started, and that's also going to keep you motivated because it's something you actually want, and it's just like some random project you found on the internet. And the good thing is that you don't really have to finish that project. You can just like get started, abandon it, and then maybe years on you'll get back to it with more experience and finish it. It's very common for developers to have like many different side projects and just like starting them and abandoning them. Sorry. There's a joke about like how much money developers spend on web domains they buy for ideas they have and they never put in place. So yeah, don't be afraid to just like get started. And yeah.
Yeah, I would say to that, you're absolutely in the right place. You started somewhere. You started by signing up with Code First Girls and attending some of these free courses. You have to start somewhere. So I'd say you're already on the right path. Start somewhere. Join some of the courses. Another shameless plug for the GFK route, but we've got a bunch of we've got Python and web dev and data and SQL courses coming up in the next couple of months. I think some of them already started, but yeah, I think you're already doing the right thing. You started somewhere. Just keep going.
Absolutely, and as Code First, we do have free courses for university students and some sponsored courses that may even get you a job at the end of it. So absolutely keep an eye on the websites I posted earlier in the chat. Thank you very much for that. We have another question here. In addition to technical skills, is it an advantage to have soft skills such as a client-facing experience or team management skills? This is someone who's a current project manager. Maybe we'll go to Erin, you first this time. You're also manager of this department.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is Emily. You could probably do my job. I come from a project management background, more than engineering operations background. So yeah, I would say that depending on the kind of career path you want to go down, soft skills are so important. I do very little technical work on a daily basis, like what Fernando was saying. As a manager, I do a lot more administrative, managing department kind of stuff work. But I spend all day talking to like I said, I do a lot of recruitment. I spend all day talking to agencies, talking to vendors, talking to suppliers, internal, external stakeholders, and having those soft skills, being organized, being able to make a plan, stick to it, milestones, all the stuff that you've learned as a project manager. Those skills are absolutely transferable into a more tech-oriented domain. So really, you're coming in at a huge advantage because you already have kind of this skill set, and you only need to learn the technical skill set rather than you're starting from scratch and you need to learn all of it. So you're in a really good place.
Excellent, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I just wanted to also add that yeah, usually we developers, we have this we're famous for being like shy and not having like really good social skills. I'm not saying it's obviously a stereotype. It doesn't mean that we're all like that. But yeah, having soft skills is definitely something that it's very needed in a software development environment, and it's going to usually when you have these skills, you end up acting like the glue that just like gets everybody together, and you end up being kind of like a multiplier of like these people like or like developers by themselves. Yeah, they can get far, but working as a team with somebody who's like making sure they communicate properly and basically have like a common goal and etc. is going to help get much further.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. Another question here. Do you think it'll be harder to get a job as a self-taught through boot camps than people coming from schools or university?
No. I mean, like basically the advantage that you get for going to university is that you get like a more solid, let's say, theoretical base. Let's say uh, at uni they teach you like binary code and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not really something that you need, and certainly you can learn it as you go by yourself. I was actually having a chat with a friend of mine who he also graduated with me in uni back home, and there's also another thing about uni is that you are basically they're teaching you stuff which is useful, but also the format is something that like you learn it, you go and take a test, and then you forget about it. So when you go and you rediscover it via like reading books or the internet, you kind of like assimilate it better, and then you can like remember you have that tool to use whenever it's needed, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm not saying definitely you don't have to go to uni or to school. You can teach yourself. But we go back to the other question about obviously teaching by learning by yourself. It requires structure, so you have to put a lot of effort and time into it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, was that university gives you the benefit of structure in that they set out a course curriculum. Here's what you need to learn. We're going to break it down into chunks. We're going to teach it to you in, somewhat digestible format. And then we're going to test you on it at the end of it to make sure that you've understood. That's really the benefit of a formal education. But I would agree with Fernando that it's absolutely not required. The large caveat that I would put on that is that in order to make your CV stand out, you should have, if you don't have a degree or you don't have any kind of formal education to put on there, totally fine. But you need to have something to show on there with your skills. So a link to a portfolio, like what Fernando was talking about, put some little projects together, even if they're not finished, even if they're not amazing, something that can show your skills that will set you apart from another applicant who maybe has a degree but doesn't have any, solid hard things to show for it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and there's many places where you can get like certificates for courses. For example, Udemy, when you finish a course, you get like a certificate. You can also put in your CV or your LinkedIn profile. And I think as of lately, LinkedIn has like some, I can't remember the name, but you take like a quiz on a specific, language or skill, and then you get like a badge in your profile. So that also means, like, yeah, you can also show, you have that to display.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly having something like a GitHub or something to display the work you've done is always a bonus. Interviewers like to see that. And then if you can display it in some other way or explain the process and where you got is super beneficial. There's been a few questions around do I need a certificate or formal education? So I hope that question has been answered for those who asked. Another question just come in, just saying, hi, thanks for the great MOOC. It has been very informative. Do you have any advice for someone taking part in tech interviews? How did you get to a level of passing the code, etc.?
Yeah, sadly, I'm not the right person for this question because I suck at lead code. I mean, like, yeah, it's not like yeah, it's not like my expertise, let's say. But yeah, like if you want to get to a level where you're like being able to basically go through lead code problems very easily. You have to keep practicing. It's a repetition, repetition, repetition.
Absolutely. Well, just to sort of expand on that question, what do you think, how much code would you expect someone to maybe know as sort of a baseline understanding? Is there something people can aim for? Is it just a case of go learn as much as you can? But obviously people start to say, as the diagram you showed, you start learning, you're like, oh my goodness, I know nothing. So where's a good point for people to maybe start looking to apply?
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'm not. I don't really know exactly how to answer because I think it covers a lot. That question. I mean, it obviously, yeah, you 100% you don't want to like spread yourself too thin, trying to learn every single possible thing. So yeah, I would go back to what I said earlier, like find something that you like, that you're really interested in, and that's going to give you kind of an idea. Because the something that's true is that you also need to try different things. So obviously you're not going to be doing this in a single year. Like over some number of years, you're going to be trying different things. Let's say in my case, I started very interested a lot in design. I actually have like like design books laying around somewhere. Um, so I was like very much into like color theory and typography and all these kind of things. And then I've been slowly drifting to more like servers and backends and databases and stuff like that. Um, so I think that yeah, you have to be like trying a little bit of everything. Maybe yeah, like getting closer. Maybe you don't have to meet people, but like maybe like following them on Twitter and stuff. It's also going to help you get an idea of exactly which of the many different paths you can take. I'm hoping it helped. I know I haven't really answered the question, but yes, a very, very difficult question to answer.
No, absolutely. It is quite difficult. So I have another question for you. And as we're nearing the end, what is the most important thing you would like our audience to take away from today?
Yeah, from my side, obviously I don't know what Erin is going to say, but from my side is what I was saying, that an interview is a negotiation. You are sitting down in a table, and you are at the exact same level as the company. The company is looking for a professional, and you are that professional who's providing a service for a fee. So don't uh, try not be intimidated. Remember, yeah, like we were saying, interviewers are also people. They can also make mistakes. They can also have a bad day, for example. So yeah, just walk into the interview without being stressed and nervous. Like obviously there's going to be like a base level of nervousness and stuff because obviously. But yeah, just try and make the best of the interview. Try to enjoy it, even if it's happened to me. I got to an interview and halfway through, uh, I forgot how to test at all. I didn't know how to run a test at all completely because I just like my brain shut down. But then even though I failed in that interview, it helped me. It gave me like I learned something from it. So that's what I would say. The two things to take away from this is, don't be nervous. You are not in a disadvantage in an interview, and just have fun and try and learn as much as you can from every single interview you take. Erin?
Yeah, that's great advice. Um, yeah, just to follow on that, be prepared. I'm one of those people that like I will study for a test like right up until I take the test, even though I know that that's not helpful. That for me, that's like a calming mechanism that I feel extra prepared. So I like to over prepare if I'm doing a job interview. I like to get it, do as many practice as I can. Do mock interviews with friends, and like what we were saying about just having a conversation with people. If you can, just try and strike up a conversation with someone random, with small talk and stuff. And I think it really helps you gain confidence in just speaking about yourself confidently to other people. And when you're really prepared, you're really confident. You don't know everything, but what you know it. And that kind of just just self-confidence, and that you know that you're, like Fernando was saying, you are a competent professional and you have to offer what they want to what they are looking for. And you can go into that interview with your head held high, you know, shoulders back, chest up, like in a great position. And then that just puts you right on the right foot forward to have a successful interview and a good negotiation. And hopefully, if you want the job, you get the job.
Absolutely. No, that is fantastic advice. And I hope everyone has enjoyed our MOOC today. Thank you very much, Erin, Fernando, for sharing your advice and giving our audience the top tips on how to beat the interview. And fingers crossed we will see them in the world of tech soon enough. So I just want to close by saying thank you for signing up to Code First MOOC. Please do keep an eye out for other courses and MOOCs in the future. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.